Today we're going to do a connection setup and show you exactly what it takes to put one end of a cable connecting it to another end of a heat cable. Okay, first thing I want to go over is the tools that you're going to need and some of the supplies. The supplies, you're going to need 2 of these yellow butt splice crimps, a copper ground crimp. You're going to need some mastic tape in different sizes. We'll show you why. A heat shrink sleeve. This is glue lined. It's required to keep it sealed and watertight. The tools required, you're going to need a razor knife of some sort to cut the cable. You'll need a crimper. We specially design these for our how we do this. It's good to have a pair of scissors in the hand so that you can cut material if needed, and some electrical tape. To finish everything off, you're going to want a heat gun. Of course, we have a Milwaukee painted silver, so it stays in our shop, but a heat gun to melt the heat shrink, and that will help you out. So these are the tools you need. We're going to get right into this to show you exactly how to do this. So I'm going to shift some of these things out of the way. Okay, first thing you want to do is you're going to strip back this cable so you can prep this end and this end before connecting them together. The first thing that we do is we're going to come back on this cable about 3.5 inches in size and score the wire with the razor knife. You're not going to cut all the way into it. There's actually no need. As you score the outside and you bend it backwards, you will actually see it open up and you can see the ground braid on the inside. Do the same thing with the other side. As you do that, you will then score a line right down the outer jacket of the cable. Once you do that, you can actually snap this inside and it'll pop a hole or open that up. You can get your finger in there, grab a hold of that, open it up and pull it right off of there. So that's how you remove the outer jacket. The ground braid, you want to try not to destroy or compromise the ground braid in any way. There's a couple ways to get the ground braid out of the way. You need to keep this ground braid for the connection. And a lot of people, they will get their fingers in and start to unweave the ground braid little by little and take it apart. If you remove less of the outer jacket, you got less ground braid to undo and take apart. So we'll do this one this way. You can use a screwdriver, something else, but if you remove the majority of that and unweave it, bring it back around to the other side here and group it all together so it's nice in a nice bunch of wires here. So it's clean, it's ready to be worked with later. We're going to tuck that out of the way. The next thing we want to do is we need to remove the next layer of the cable. So I'm going to come in about 1 inch to maybe 1.25 inches up. And again, I'm just going to score the outside of that. Just enough that I can make sure that it's cut through as I do that. So a lot of times you can actually grab that and just slide it off and take it off the cable. Discard the excess piece. Now I want to strip this is the carbon polymer jacket that encases the bus wires, and I need to expose the bus wires. So I'm going to take the razor knife, go on the inside of the bus wire, not on the outside. If you do it on the inside, the bus wire actually helps as a barrier so you don't actually come out of the cutting process and cut your fingers. But keep your hands together to keep it as a barrier so you can control the depth of how you're pushing this in. You're going to use the razor knife and just cut in right next to the bus wire and slide that down until you get to the bottom. Once you get to the bottom, you stop. Okay, I'm going to flip this over, do the same thing with the other bus wire. And again, I'm going to come on the inside of the bus wire. Go ahead and slide this down. You'll actually feel it sliding against the bus wire. At this point, we need to remove the center piece. I will often just cut halfway on the inside there, halfway on the inside there, and remove that. In the process of cutting this, do not cut the bus wire or cut any of the strands off of it. You don't want to compromise the size of the bus wire. Next, you're just going to score the outside of what's left, just enough that when you fold that over, you can expose some of the bus wire, grab the corner of that with your thumb, and pull the excess off and discard it. Same thing with the other side. Lightly score it, not to get the bus wire. Get your thumb in there, grab that. Sometimes it becomes a little bit difficult there. I'm going to grab a pair of pliers, just get a hold of that and pull that off. Easy enough. Okay, so now I have prepped the cable. We have the ground braid, we have the barrier jacket, and we have the bus wires exposed. At this point, we're going to take the bus wires and send them outside so they're out of the way, and we need to prep this area with our mastic tape. The small square, we're going to take this and you're going to lay it underneath so that it comes up about halfway in the mastic tape there, with the bus wires sending out directly outside of that. We are then going to wrap the mastic tape around the base, like so. At this point, you're going to fold the top half over the top of this, sealing anything in between, and wrapping the mastic tape around the back side, just like that. Now, you can take the bus wires and stand them up forward, just like that. This is now ready to put the crimp and apply the crimp on here. We're going to do the same thing to the other end of cable. I'm going to show you how I do the ground braid on that one. So you can kind of choose your option how you want to do that. We'll do this a little bit quicker. So in this case, I'm going to kind of open up some of the jacket of the ground braid, and I'm going to fold it around the side of the cable, and I'm going to fold this over and slide the ground braid up over the top, allowing me to push the cable through the hole and exposing it that way. This is all personal preference. You can do it either way. But now all my ground braid is back here, neatly braided together, can't come apart. It's clean. Okay. Now that we have both cables prepped, ready for the connection, we're going to bring our connection pieces into the picture, and that's these two pieces. They're the butt splice pieces, and these we're going to connect onto the end of the wire. One of the first things that I do is cut just enough of the bus wire off of there so that we can accommodate this thing sliding on. And I want to have that down sitting onto the mastic tape, covering a chunk of it. in prepping this, you want to make sure everything's as even as possible so that you can keep consistency on your sizing and where everything lays. These crimps are designed, well, they were originally purchased with some other stuff. We grind them down so that we can get into these tight areas. So I'm going to go ahead and crimp this on just like so. It doesn't take a whole lot. Check your connection, make sure it's solid. So pull on it, make sure it's tight. Put the next one on there. I'm going to go ahead and crimp that down. Now let's take this one here. If you ever have a crimper that's not really pushing it down tight, you can also cut off a little less than what's needed. Take the bus wire, pinch it halfway down and fold this to give it a little bit more mass to grab. Okay? So this is, again, personal preference, but you want to make sure you have a good connection on there. So now we're going to go ahead and slide these together. And a lot of times, because you have a very short wire here, you need to put both of them in sometimes at the same time. And just make sure you have a good, clean connection right there. Okay? I'm going to hold this with the one hand, take my crimps, go ahead and pinch that one down. I'm going to pinch this one, same thing on this side. Give it a good tug, make sure it's solid, not going to pull out. And at this point, you've got a great connection running your bus wires to the next one, connecting your two wires together. Now we also want to protect this system here. Make sure that when you megger or fire up the system, electricity does not find its way from the bus wire to the ground braid. And that is what this larger piece of mastic tape is for. I find it ideal if I can take this mastic tape and slip it between those two butt splices there. Stretch this pretty good and make sure it wraps around it. And then I'm going to take this mastic tape and really cover everything I can on this connection and wrap it up all nice and snugly tight so no electricity can pass from that bus wire to the ground braid. So we got a clean, sealed connection there. At this point, I want to bring my ground braids together. I probably should have flipped this wire down so that both ground braids are on the same side. Doesn't really matter as long as I have a clean connection there. So I'm going to bring this together, slide your copper crimp onto one of them, and then I'll take the other one, this one that was unbraided. I like to have it twisted all together so that I can actually put this one in with that, pull the two together. This helps me to get a clean connection and keep all the material flat and compressed. Okay, so once I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and crimp that ground to the ground braid. I will hit all points of this just to make sure the whole thing ends up pretty flat. Okay, so once it's there, it's crimped down. Keep in mind, the corner points of this ground crimp can be kind of sharp. So when you heat shrink this down, it can poke through. And that is one of the reasons why we take electrical tape, and we will just wrap this up to buffer any sharp edges, anything that could poke through the heat shrink, in making sure that it keeps a watertight seal. So I'm just going to go over this whole thing here. And we're good. Okay, so at this point, your connection is solid, sealed. Everything looks good. Before you add your heat shrink sleeve to this and shrink it on, you'd want to test it and measure this line. if you have anything like a problem with your connection, this is the best time to unwrap that, dig back into it, and make sure you check your connection in there. Keep in mind, when putting this together, if you have 100 feet of cable going that way and 100 feet of cable that way, it's best to put this thing on before you put all your connection together. In this case, I just have a short piece on both ends for demonstration. So we're going to go ahead and slip this on. And to make sure we have a halfway point, I will often put this heat shrink to the end of the connection there, mark it with my thumb on the other side, get an idea of what my halfway is here, put my thumb there, and that is where that needs to be. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and shrink the heat shrink onto this, seal it up using the heat gun. Couple things I want to point out. Start your heat gun from the center and then work your way out. Then again, come back to the center and work your way the other direction. You don't want to trap any of the air pockets on the inside by sealing the ends and then not be able to get that air out. So I always start in the middle, do it one side, heat it all the way out, then here, heat it this way, flip it over, do the same thing on the other side. Once you have one side done, it's not a bad idea to take a pair of pliers and just lightly press that down. I would advise not putting a zip tie on this point and sucking it down really tight or pinching this down really tight, because you can actually push the glue in here out, eliminating the glue presence in connecting and sealing that shut. You just want to make sure it's actually touching, and all I'm doing is just enough to make sure it's actually creating a seal. Now let's go ahead and do the other side. When I get to the end of the cable or the end of the heat shrink by the cable, I want to make sure I'm not putting too much heat on the cable itself, potentially burning the outer jack of the heat cable. So you'll notice I come to that point, I hit it for a second and come away from it. And you can often see if the cable itself, the outer jacket's getting burned or not. So be cautious about the cable, make sure it's always protected, and that you're keeping an eye on how much heat is being applied to that. Okay, I can see that that's a good seal. I have got some good glue actually coming through on the outside of that. So that's something you can tell that water's not going to get in here. Something you'll learn in the process of our training. Water can find its way into the cable through some of the smallest holes. We'll explain how that works. So these connection points are very critical. They're done right. And this is the proper connection for an end-to-end heat cable to heat cable connection.